It seemed to want attention, to cause disruption. The family and others in the building would be woken up in the middle of the night by pained screams that would echo from the chimney. At times it would call out for someone named Maria, asking her to come to it. But a lot of its messages seemed to be aimed at the maid, Squala, who it seemed to fixate on, often just shouting out her name before breaking into a maniacal laugh that chilled the young girl to the bone. It kept demanding that she come to the stove, to come closer to the darkness inside. But it would never reveal who or what it was, not even to her. The residents later described the voice as intelligent, even witty, but prone to anger, delivering threats and seemingly pointless demands as well. Many in the building believed it to be simply a prank, but no one was able to find the culprit. By mid-November, unable to find a compelling explanation, Palazon family contacted the police. It's very likely that the police would have ignored a claim of a goblin hiding in the stove. But the story was already beginning to get attention outside of the apartment block, and they thought it would be best to go along and try to put an end to this whole thing before it got out of hand. The police arrived and, sure enough, they too heard the voice. In fact, it seemed to know who the police were, calling each officer by name as they stepped into the apartment. This seemed to be an increasingly common detail. The voice could see what was going on in the apartment at all times, which made it difficult to accept that this was simply someone else in the building, shouting into a vent. They stepped into the kitchen, and one of the officers decided to test the theory that whoever this was could see them. He flipped the light switch off. The voice shouted out for him to turn the light back on. He did so, and then the police began to speak to the voice in the phone, asking who it was, but they did not receive an answer. Then the police officer asked how many of them were in the room, and the voice gave the correct answer. The police, still convinced that this was simply the work of someone desperately trying to get attention, continued the conversation. "Do you want money?" they asked. "No," the voice shouted back with an aggressive tone. "Do you want a job?" "No." Again, it said in an even more gravelly voice than before. "Man, then what do you want?" "I am not a man," it responded, leading to a chilling silence between all those present in the kitchen. As creepy as the response was, the police still did not believe that anything supernatural was at play here. Instead, it was clear someone, somewhere in the building, was doing this. They began to assemble a team to investigate. In a documentary on the case, it was said they put together a team of intellectuals, but seemingly this was a combination of architects, engineers, and stonemasons who had constructed the original building. They then began to inspect the building from top to bottom until they could find somewhere that the perpetrator could be hiding. All of the various ducts were inspected: the cellar, the attic, the roof, and even a cafe that occupied the ground floor. But there was nothing. No sign of anyone at all. All the while they searched, the voice could be heard, laughing, mocking. On one occasion, one of the investigators was in the kitchen, measuring the opening of the chimney. As he pulled out his tape measure, the voice responded that there was no need to measure. The opening was 75 centimeters wide. The man paused and then measured it anyway. The voice was correct. He was so freaked out that the mason left the apartment quickly and refused to return, leaving his tools behind and not coming back for them. By this point, the public had become very aware of the goings-on in the building. The newspapers were running updates on the case daily, but not just locally. The story was even picked up by the Times in London, which also published daily stories of what they were referring to as the polite Spanish ghost, as well as similar stories in the New York Times later on. Tourists even began to be bussed into the area. At times, thousands of people would show up on the street outside, all desperately trying to gain access to the building, or get close enough to hear the voice. On occasion, the crowds grew so large that the police couldn't handle them, prompting the local governor to station troops on the street to keep the peace. Some of the public came along almost as a joke, just seeing the whole thing as a bit of fun. There was an almost playful, carnival-like atmosphere to these visitors. Reports were made of people running around the nearby rooftops, wearing sheets over their heads and moaning. 6 separate people were arrested for this, although I can't imagine they were charged, unless there was a crime of impersonating a ghost at the time. Numerous people attempted to gain access to the building by pretending to be officials investigating the case. A radio station from Barcelona wanted to put a microphone in the kitchen to broadcast the goblin's messages, but they were denied access. But others saw it in a much more serious light, that something truly unexplainable was taking place in this building. Those people were separated into 2 camps. One half saw it as a miracle, a voice from beyond. Others saw it as something much more sinister, even demonic. This theory led to a priest being brought in to sprinkle holy water over the stove, but that seemingly did little to help the situation. According to a New York Times article from the period, several women in other apartments were somehow preemptively given the exorcism rites to avoid bewitchment. On one occasion, the owner of the building was in the Palazon family's apartment with several police officers and his youngest son, Arturo. Arturo actually became the last living known witness to this whole incident and was interviewed for a Spanish language documentary in the 2000s. He said by this point the building no longer felt like home. There were constant streams of people coming and going, and the police were stationed at all hours of the day, both inside and outside the building. It was getting late into the evening, and he was growing tired of the whole ordeal, just wanting to head back to his family's apartment. He turned to his dad and said, "Let's go, Dad. Let's go to sleep. This whole thing is crazy." That was when the voice spoke directly to him. In its deep voice it said, "Not crazy, little one." That was the last time Arturo said he heard the voice. He refused to go back to the apartment after this. The experience still haunted him well into his adult years. Even at this young age, he felt like this was something profoundly wrong. It felt like an interaction with something that should not be interacted with. With the increasing public awareness, there was also increasing pressure on the police to find a suspect and put this whole thing to bed. The governor was becoming more involved and was convinced that one of the supposed witnesses must be responsible. They began to bring in doctors and psychiatrists to speak with the residents of the building, one of whom was a well-respected psychiatrist named Joaquin Jimen Arriria, who seemed to quickly become fixated on the family's maid, Pasquala. The psychiatrist interviewed the entire family, but his conversations with Pasquala were referred to more as an interrogation. She was the first person to hear the voice beyond just the laughter. In his eyes, she was the most likely suspect behind this tall tale. After their conversation, Aurora decided that this was not a hoax, but that the maid was still responsible. He believed that she was hysterical, and as a result of this, was suffering from something he called unconscious ventriloquism. Unconscious ventriloquism is referred to as a psychological phenomenon